Good morning, welcome back to my DC2 K20 Racecar build. It's been a while since the last update. I think the last video was after I'd fixed the fuel system in January this year. It's now sort of late April. I just want to give a bit of a recap of the events that I've competed in since then. It's raced it 5 times since, and just work through the car, look over any issues, that sort of thing, and also talk a bit through the development curve, so what it takes to get a brand new race car up to a standard that I'm happy with and feel comfortable to drive. So I'll start off with the car first. Everything's been going really well, super reliable, really happy with it. No major issues whatsoever, just some like real niggly little stuff. So little things like the rear exhaust hanger wasn't working properly, so I've had to add some extra wire to hold that in place because it's been melting the bumper. Again, no issue at all. Up front, had a very small weep from the brake line that goes into the brake bias adjuster there. Can't seem to fix it. I've tightened it up a heap. Those are bubble flares, which are not super reliable, but it's a tiny weep. It's not pissing out, so it's just like a little bit's leaking out each time, a couple drops after a day, so I'm okay with that. Engine's going great, all the logs showing it's super stable, super reliable. Fuel system is completely fixed, that's all good. Hasn't been breathing much either. The catch can has very minimal in it after each event, so pretty happy. Uses a bunch of fuel, as you'd expect, being on E85. It's somewhere in the region of 2 litres a lap, but that's all good. But yeah, car itself has been going fantastic. Brakes all been pretty good. They're actually so good that I'm struggling with how little time I have to brake at the end of each straight. So probably the one thing I'm trying to develop is get the auto blip downshift working properly in the Haltech software, because it has a drive-by-wire throttle. That hasn't been super successful, so when I'm heel towing myself, my brake pressure falls away so much that it's taking me, as I'm moving my foot across to blip the accelerators or downshift, that's kind of impacting my braking times. Because a car like this is not super fast in a straight line. Like it's pretty quick, but because it's so light and so fast through corners, you just don't need to brake that much. So even, let's say, from 200 kilometers an hour down to 100 kilometers an hour, which is about the biggest braking that I do on any of our circuits here, it's only, a couple of seconds on the pedal before I'm starting to ease off and turn into the corner. So I'm just getting to grips with how good these brakes are, and I'll probably start not heel towing into certain corners so I can maximize brake pressure and see if that's faster for me, and then just sort of down change normally as I'm quite close to the corner, so it's not going to jerk the car when I release the clutch. Electrically, everything's been going really well. No major issues in the harnesses. All seem to work pretty well perfectly, which I'm super happy about. A couple of weird issues have popped up. First is the reverse lights. So the reverse lights are triggered by the reverse engagement switch in the gearbox. The Haltech software just doesn't seem to pick up that signal very well. So all I did is just take that reverse switch, turn it into, let's call it like a custom sensor in the Haltech software, and then just do my own manual circuit trigger on the reverse lights based on that sensor output, and that's worked fine since. And same with the headlights. So what I was finding is low beams work when you turn them on. When you switch to high beams, and I need high beams at some night events that I do, it would turn the low beams off, including my rear tail lights, which is not great. Couldn't figure out why. I did a heap of testing. It was nothing to do with the electrics in the harness itself, because even with all the high beams completely unplugged, it still turned off the low beams when I hit the high beam switch, even though literally nothing was happening because it was unplugged. Again, I put it down to a quirk of the Haltech software, so all I did was just, instead of using the standard Haltech high beam functionality, I just created a custom trigger off the keypad in the car that just turns on the high beams. That's worked perfectly. Both high and low stay on whenever I need them to. Now let's have a look at some tyres. So one of the key things for seeing how well a car going is how well it uses its tyres. These are Advan A050s, A050. They're a tyre that's only available in Australia and Japan, and they're absolutely fantastic. Best RComp tyre you'll find anywhere. We love these things. They don't really heat cycle out, they're just fast until they're completely dead. Very forgivable, very easy to drive on. So what we've got is rear left, rear right, front right. I'll talk about the fronts first. These are wearing quite nicely. I've got 4 degrees of camber up front, which is a fair bit for a Honda, because they're double wishbone and they don't need a lot of static camber. I've had these front tyres flipped, so think of this as the inside of the tyre. It's still wearing pretty nice. I've been running really low pressures in these, like down to sort of 25 psi hot, and they're still holding up fine. So I've got a couple of vents left in those two, but pretty happy with that alignment. I'm not going to change that. No need to. The rears is where it gets interesting. So this is the left rear. So this is the outside of the tyre. This is the inside of the tyre. I'll talk to some handling issues a bit later on in this, but one of the things I've been doing to try and fix those handling issues is running these stupid low pressures, like 22 psi hot. That's helped a bit in that it's starting to use the outside of the tyre a bit more. But you can see down here, it's not using the inside of the tyre at all. I find that really curious. What I think is the cause of that is that it's got pretty limited rear droop, so it picks up the inside wheel in most corners. What I think is happening is, because the inside wheel is the only wheel that's really going to load up this sort of inside corner through a corner, especially running such low pressures, because the deformation just pushes everything towards the outside. Because it's pulling that inside wheel off the ground, I just think it's not getting any real meaningful contact on it. So I'm surprised with that. It's quite a wide rear tyre. I'm running like 2.5 degrees of camber, which is heaps for the rear, so it should be using the inside. But I think it's just a quirk of 3-wheeling through most corners. So again, really happy with how the tyres are going. But what I want to come to next is suspension. So what I've been struggling with, and I'll talk through more of this when I get to sort of some of the in-car videos, is the car's really unstable. So I'm not someone who loves oversteer. I prefer a car that tends towards understeer, and I find that to be fastest for me. I like to just be in a little bit of understeer rather than sort of the rear stepping out, because as soon as the rear steps out, you just scrub off heaps of corner speed and you lose a lot of time. Sure, it's great for slow speed corners where your car rotates and you're back on the throttle, but mostly this is sort of high speed oversteer, which is not something I enjoy. So a couple of theories for why that is. First theory is the front track. So to fit the tyres on the car, the rears are about a +40 offset, and that's a 235 tyre, so that just fits under the factory rear guards. The fronts are like a +20 offset to get them far enough out for the car, being 17-inch large tyres, so I've still got room for steering lock. That means the front track is like 40 millimeters wider than the rear track, so that's somewhere in the region of just over 1.5 inches. That's quite a lot. That adds a lot of grip to the front, so the wider your track is, the more grip you have. It's physics. So I think that's contributing to it. So let's say I'm trying to chuck it into a corner or doing a change of direction between corners, it really feels like it wants to whip the rear around. The other thing that I'm going to play with is the rear spring rate. So with these, the Shockworks coilovers, so they're 20 kg front springs, 14 kg rear springs. That's perfect for a car that doesn't have as much geometry correction as I've got. So because I've got the honed roll center correction front and rear, that adds a lot of rear roll stiffness and probably means the rear's a little bit oversprung. And that there is kind of confirmed by how bouncy and skippy the rear is in longer corners. So once the rear's loaded up, it wants to kind of skip out. And I've tuned the damping like from pretty much full hard down to full soft. It does it at all stages. It's either bouncing on the spring because there's not enough damping, or as soon as you get to a decent amount of damping, it's still just skipping because the rear's quite hard. So to fix that, Shockworks are complete legends. Like no other company gives you this level of customer support. All 4 dampers will be pulled out today and sent back in, so the rears are going to be revalved to be a little bit softer on the rebound, and also I'll swap to some lighter springs. So I'll try some 11 kg springs in the rear, and the front, what I'm going to try and do is probably just a tiny bit more damping preload on it, because I'm having to run these quite stiff, so like 10 out of 12 compared to say 3 out of 12 in the rear. And I'm going to shorten the front stroke a little bit too, because there's a lot of front droop in this, and so I just want to like pull that back to be sort of 50-50, so it's 50% compression travel, 50% droop travel. So all pretty normal things to work through in the case of a car's development, and all things that have arisen because of compromises that I've made through the build process. You have to compromise every time you do something like this. So in sort of my case, the main compromise is the front wheel offset, as I spoke about. Because I'm running 17s, I have to space them quite far out in order to give myself some steering lock, and that's caused the track issues. And then also it's just balancing the geometry correction that I've done compared to how Shockworks would normally set up a set of coilovers for a car without the geometry correction. So yeah, pretty easy stuff to work through. Shockworks, again, are fantastic to work with. You literally do not get this customer service anywhere else. So they'll take care of that and get them back to me soon. The other thing I'm going to do is probably swap back to 15-inch wheels. So the reason I went 17s originally is one, so I could run pretty wide AO50s. They're a 255 40-17 front and a 235 45-17 rear. And also for the big boy brakes, so they're 330mm Alcon 4-pots. The compromise with that is you're very limited on ride height. You can't run the car low unless you cut all the inside of the front wheel wells out and tub it, and same for the rear and flares, and that's a heap of work that I don't want to do. And because the wheel's physically larger diameter than what this car was designed to run, it just hits everywhere. So you can see in the wheel well, it's hitting at the back, it's hitting up the top, it's hitting a fair bit up there, which is alarming. Hitting by that bolt, hitting down the air at lock as well. So that means that even though running quite a high ride height and setting up my bump stops to be quite conservative, we're still getting into the chassis with the front tyres, which is just not great. My previous car ran 15-inch wheels, and that was not an issue. You can run an offset more like a plus 35 or plus 30 on the front, compared to like a plus 35, plus 38 on the rear. So that really fixes the track issue, as well as just giving me a heap more space to play with inside the wheel wells, and allows me to get the car lower. So at the moment, underneath the side skirt and underneath the front lip, I've got like 140mm of clearance from the ground, which is heaps. That's like almost 5 inches. So with moving to 15s, which are a physically shorter tyre, and I can also move them up in the guards, I can drop the car about 60mm, so about 2.5 inches. That will get me down to a ride height which is a bit more in line for running aerodynamics later on, but mainly it'll give me, it'll fix a lot of the compromises that I've made with suspension. So what's the trade-off of moving back to 15s, and why didn't I do it in the first place? Well, with these tyres, the AO50s, they don't come in particularly wide sizes in 15s. They only come with a 225 50-15 as the absolute most. And that's a big tyre. It's physically larger than a 225. It's probably more like a 235, but it's still definitely not a 255. So I'll probably run a set of wheels with AO50s for things like rally sprint events or like wet circuit events. But what I'm going to have to do is switch to Who's Your A7s. They come in any width you want in a 15. So I'll probably start with a 245 front, which again, they run really wide. That's probably wider than my 255 AO50. And probably a 205 rear. Again, that runs really wide. It's probably more like a 225 and other tyres. Had really good results out of the Who's Your A7s on my previous car. I just love running the AO50s because they're so easy to drive on. They're fast till they're dead, and it doesn't matter what the weather is. So basically just moving to slicks. The other issue I've got to fix is the front brakes. That's really easy actually. This exact kit comes in a 15-inch, like a 300mm rotor. So all I need to do is just get different dog bones to bring the caliper closer in, and then new rotors, and then that's completely fixed to brakes that'll fit under 15-inch wheels. And yeah, I'll lose a bit of braking capacity out of it, but as I've spoken about before, the car's got heaps of brake. No issues at all there, and I'm not doing particularly long events in it. Like at the moment, the most I'd ever do is probably 5 or 6 laps in a row. So heat capacity is not a big issue either, and I haven't ducted them either. So there's still plenty of scope to keep the brakes cool, being a bit smaller. So that's all pretty standard things you go through when you build a race car from scratch and want to get it up to speed. The main thing is my comfort in the car is just not there yet. So I want to get it sort of feeling like I want to feel, and I think the suspension and the wheel changes will help that, and then I can really start to push it. A number of friends here have quite fast Hondas as well. They're all very different cars, which is the fun thing about race cars. You can build them in many different ways. So it's things like different tyre setup, different suspension setup, different aero setups. It all makes them a bit different. So even though it's a pretty clear recipe how to make one of these things quick, you still need to do a lot of development and thinking and testing to get up to speed. I'm also pretty hard on myself because I expect to be quick straight away. As I said earlier, the car's only done a few events, so there's still a lot of time left to get this working the way it is, and the results I've got so far are actually really great. So really happy, but also I see how much potential is still left on the table, so I want to exploit that potential. So that's about it for the car side of things. Yeah, everything else is working perfectly. I'm loving driving this thing. It sounds great, super reliable, just does what a race car needs to do, so really happy with the outcome, and we'll just keep slowly developing things to get it quick around corners and get the times down to where we want them. So now let's go through some events that I've done over the previous few months. So I do two main series here in Perth, which is in Australia. The first is the Shannon's Rally Sprint series, which is a tarmac rally sprint. So you have a co-driver, but you're just doing a single stage multiple times, in this case 4 times, and you add the times together from those 4 runs to give you your total time, and that's how you place. So it's not quite a full stage rally, it's just a single stage, but that's why it's called a rally sprint, and it's held at the grounds of our local drag strip down at Perth Motorplex. So I managed to make rounds 4 and 5 of the current season, which is just finished, and I'm in the open under 2 litre class and managed to win my class both times, which is great. And I was, I think, somewhere in the region of 12th overall, or 10th overall from like 80 cars, so really happy with that. Again, I'm still trying to get comfortable with the car, so figuring out how it handled and figuring out gearing and downshifts and all that fun stuff was a mission, but we got through it, and yeah, pretty good results overall. The benchmark for me is a friend of mine called Focky. He's got a DC5 Integra with a K20. He's always been the benchmark for the fastest NA car at these rally sprints. He's not racing these seasons, unfortunately. His work's a bit too busy, but his times are still the benchmark. So I'm not too far off, only a second or 2 from where he's at, and I know there's a lot left in the car, so really happy with how this is progressing. So I'll just put in a couple of in-car clips. First will be round 4, which is in the clockwise direction. These run at night, so it can be pretty hard to see sometimes. And then the second run after that will be round 5 in the anti-clockwise direction, which is much preferred for me. It's a much faster course, you can see by the differences in times, but I seem to be much more comfortable going in this direction. So we'll put up those in-cars now, and you can have a watch.
The first half was still of an average.
Yeah, there's a bit of time we found up the first half.
Yeah.
Next up is the other series that I compete in, the WA State Speed Event Series. That runs sort of throughout the year. For us, it's autumn, winter, and spring, which is sort of like February through to December. Great event, good mix of circuit sprints or time attacks, and things like hill climbs and other little point-to-points, which are quite similar to the tarmac rally sprint stuff too. Huge variety of cars, great people, really enjoy the series. So first round that I competed in for this year was rounds 2 and 3 down at Collie Motorplex, which is about 2.5 hours south of Perth. It's my favourite track in the state, probably in the country. It's just an absolutely amazing track, and the people that run it are just the best. So on the Saturday we did the long track configuration, and the Sunday we did the short track configuration. On the Saturday, this is my first real time starting to push on the racetrack with the car, which is quite different to a sprint event because you've got long high speed corners. And was very uncomfortable straight away. So like I spoke about earlier, the car's quite unstable, and that's what I found. As soon as I'd start to load it up in a corner, I'd want to step out, and just learning to drive around that and learning to predict how the car's going to react. Still pretty good though, ended up with a 1:18.9 lap time on the long track configuration, which I think was 11th overall and first in the open under 2 litre class. My target time for that track is somewhere in the 1:16 range, so still a ways away from where I want to be, but with further development I think that should be easily achievable. On the Sunday with a short track event, that's a track that's a bit more suited to a car like this because there's no real long straight, pretty short lap too, so around the 52nd or high 40s for a good car. Got a bit more comfortable. I started playing with tyre pressures, and that's when I put the rears down to like 22 psi and the fronts were sort of around 25 hot, and got it to the point where I was pretty comfortable starting to push. and was just chopping off like a second each time I went out. So ended up with a 50.2 second lap time, which is pretty good. Very close to the 49s, which is kind of the benchmark for this track. Car's definitely got a 49 in it, and I probably would have done it on the day, but there was a bit of a crash in one of the other classes, and the day got cut short early. Thankfully, driver was okay. That's why you have roll cages and safety gear. But yeah, we just decided to end the day at that point. I'll put up the in-cars in both of those now, and you can see how it went on the track. Probably doesn't look too squirrely from the in-car video. It's more just like a little thing that you can feel in your butt that the car's starting to step out. So I'm very ginger on inputs to try and control it. So we'll have a look at those now. And finally, the last event I did, which was last week, was Infinite Time Attack at Wanneroo Raceway here in Perth. That's what this little logo means. So that's like kind of a Thursday night time attack. It's pretty relaxed, no classes or anything. You just turn up and get sent out in groups and have a crack. Great fun. Again, really good people running it. That's run by the folks that run KYP Performance here in Perth. And another night event. Track's kind of well lit, some spots are not. You'll see in the video that some of them are really dark. It's not that bad in real life. But another good opportunity to start pushing. So same thing, not super comfortable. Car was starting to step out in spots and it just wasn't stable enough for me to really push. But I was able to get down to a 64.6 second lap time. So 104.6. Which was somewhere in the region of 7th overall, and again fastest under 2 litre. Pretty happy with that. So target for this car is like a low 103 as it sits, maybe like a 102 with a bit more to development. So same thing, I think me getting better at braking and getting more comfortable to push in the corners will get us there. The data says we're there, like straight line speed's fine, just got to get corner speeds to where I want them to be. and get my brake 15-20 meters later, and I'm pretty much there. So again, really happy with the outcome. We'll jump into the in-car for that now. And that's it. That's the summary of what I've been up to for the last sort of 4 months. Yeah, just to reiterate, it's always a journey to get these cars working properly. I'm trying to remind myself of that on a daily or weekly basis, so I don't get too frustrated that I'm not as fast as I want to be straight away. But that's just the nature of it. So really happy overall. When I step back and think about it, it's the fact that it's worked pretty much straight off the bat. No major issues with all the work that I've done. Really happy with it. Just got to keep driving, keep making small tweaks, get comfortable in it, and really start pushing. So looking forward to the future events. Bit of a long and talking video. I'm good at doing those. Not much actual work happening that's worth looking at. All I'm going to do today is just take the suspension out and put the stock stuff back into it. But we'll catch up again soon once I've been through a couple more events. Thanks, catch you later.